So last time we left off, we finished the body systems and just labeling them and giving functions and specific organs in there. And today we'll pick up on page 3 where it's talking about the 4 types of tissues. All right. So we'll get through these. We'll see where we end up today. I don't know if we'll get through all of it or not, but we will plug away. So once again, if you have any questions, please stop me. Ask me, all kinds of all the above. Okay, if I get going too fast, let me know. All right, so the 4 types of tissues. Again, you can see in your box at the top of your doodle notes there. We're just going to label them, so there's no real specific order that you need to put them in. Just fill this dude in. So the first type of tissue is a muscular tissue. Okay, those tissues allow movement of the skeleton, right? We already talked about the muscles in general. So muscles are tissues. Heart's a tissue. It allows that beating of the heart, the expansion, the contraction, and it helps with movement of food through the digestive system, right? So again, expanding and contracting, right? Elongating, all kinds of things that those tissues are able to do. Okay, so again, that's muscular tissue. This is the first one. Okay, and all these tissues apply to all 11 of the body systems that we covered the other day. Connective tissues. Okay, so it makes up the bone, the cartilage, the blood. It connects those organs together. Okay, hint, connective means it connects. Okay, so that tissue is connecting bone to bone or muscle to bone. Okay, all of those things to help connect and help the other tissues function as well. So you got muscular, connective tissue. Nervous tissue. Okay, so obviously, your nerves are stimulating. They're sending signals from place to place, like electrical impulses. So the nervous tissues, they conduct electrical impulses through the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. So that tissue is running a lot of your senses and the reactions from those stimulations. And then the fourth one here is the epithelial. It's kind of a strange name. Epithelial tissue, makes up your skin, the internal pathways, your glands. So it's a little bit thinner tissue, but it provides some protection throughout those different systems. Okay, so epithelial tissue. Muscular, connective, nervous, and epithelial tissues. Remember, tissues are a system of cells together, right? Everybody good on the tissues? Okay, all tissues are made of the cells. So this is just, again, hopefully this is a review of the basic parts of a cell. And we'll get deeper into mitosis, meiosis, those kind of things. All right, the nucleus, the center of the tissue there is your control center. And that's where your genetic information is stored. Okay, and it's passed along through the nucleus of the cell. So DNA is in there. That endoplasmic reticulum. I know maybe it's been a while since you've been in biology and you studied the cell, but the endoplasmic reticulum is responsible for synthesizing proteins and then ships them around throughout the cells. Okay, so it can be smooth or rough, just touching base on it. It's right outside of the nucleus there. Transfers proteins around through the cell. Mitochondria, right, converts the food into ATP, right? So different proteins. It converts that food into the proteins that spread it out throughout the cell. Anybody remember what ATP stands for? Not that it necessarily matters. You just need to understand the process of being able to transport those proteins and just different nutrients throughout the cell. Anybody remember? Adenosine triphosphate. Big medical term, right? So it provides and helps provide that energy throughout the cell. The Golgi apparatus transports the material around the cell in sacs called vesicles. There's a little apparatus responsible for transporting different materials. Lysosomes, they break down the waste, right? So it's just like, within each individual cell, it's the same kind of systems as our whole organism as a whole, right? So we have to have some sort of waste breakdown, because within that, those nutrients inside the proteins are getting broken down and transported and moved, so it's going to leave waste. So the lysosomes break those wastes down. Centrioles, they aid in that cell division, right? So we get to a point when the cells start growing and we talk about like sexual reproduction and they start to divide. The centrioles are helping in that process, the division. And then the vacuoles, they actually store nutrients in water. So they store those nutrients, prepare them for the next phase. So think looking at the doodle notes though. The bottom left box. You may have to draw in your own lines for those. I don't know if I think they got erased off of there. So the bottom left box can either be towards your vacuoles or the centrioles there, right? Should be missing those on there, those lines. The bottom left is pointing towards like your cell membrane, right? So if you want to draw your own lines to the vacuoles and centrioles, you can. Or you can use that bottom left box that's showing the cell membrane. If you want to just redraw that to the vacuoles or something, you can too. Cell membrane is pretty self-explanatory there. That makes sense? You good with that? All right, questions on just that? That's just a review. We're not going to spend a ton of time on those, right? So just understand the basics of life of the cell, and each part of the cell has very specific roles, just to help make up tissues and help make up organs, and that whole process and the cycle of life there. That's why we reviewed it. Okay. Everybody good there? We can keep moving. We may plug away and get through all these. We'll see. There's a lot of information here coming up, though. All right, so just a really fast overview of just what we've talked about so far. Okay, it's just kind of the triangle here is referencing, from the smallest to the largest. So if you look down at the bottom of the trillions of cells, that's what it begins with. It develops into 4 types of different tissues we just talked about. Right? There's 60 plus organs throughout the body, 11 specific body systems, and then you have the whole human body. That's just a hierarchy of how this is going to function. Okay, and then if you want to if you need to pull out your the little diagram from yesterday, just to reference and review to make sure that you got these dudes right with anatomical positions. Okay, because as we start, these kind of things are what we're going to be really focusing on in body systems, and kind of memorizing and understanding how this all functions. Because this is the most we'll call it relatable information that that you need at this level. All right, even understanding the cells and the cell processes, that's still, it's very, very specific to certain careers or certain fields that you'll get into. But this kind of stuff, the anatomical positions, but also understanding and memorizing like bones and muscles and things like that, that's stuff that you can carry for a long time. All right, so we'll really focus on this kind of stuff. But just a reference, so, these terms and anatomical positions, we'll get some practice in. We'll play a little game tomorrow that will help you kind of understand some of these anatomical positions and memorize them. But remember superior. So up here at the top, superior is, farthest to the top. Okay, so from your head. Okay, and you work your way down, so it's inferior. Okay, superior is the very top. Inferior is the very bottom of your feet. Okay, so the very top of your head is superior. From the very bottom of your feet would be inferior. Okay, so if we take a look at the body on the left side, cranial. Okay, so cranial is dealing with the head. Okay, if we're talking to the back side, all right, so from the back side of the head is the cranial down to the buttocks would be your caudal side. Okay, so for back side is cranial, down to the buttocks would be caudal. Anterior and posterior. Anterior is front side of the body. Okay, so it can be from the face all the way down, but anything on the front side of the body would be considered anterior or ventral. Okay, I'm going to use anterior just because that's, to me, in my opinion, for what we need, it's a little bit more layman's terms, a little bit more understandable, but anterior is the front, okay, posterior is the back. Hopefully you understood those, and that wasn't anything new. So posterior or dorsal. Okay, the more medical related you get, you'll probably get a little bit more of the dorsal side. Not saying you shouldn't know those by any means, okay, but anterior and posterior is a little bit easier to understand and remember. All right, look, yes, ma'am. That one?
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so looking at the body on the right side, okay, notice that they're facing forward. Okay, so when you're talking about right and left, this is where, honestly, as simple as right and left can be, it can get confusing. Okay, when we're talking about anatomical positions, when we're looking at a body, all right, so right is going to be their right. Okay, not our right when we're looking at it, so you can kind of almost think of it as the opposite of what you're looking at. Okay, so when we reference right or left, we're referencing their body, not our view. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that, hey, right side for her is going to be our left side when we're looking at it? Okay, so that's why it seems a little bit opposite, but right side is their view. Okay, proximal is, starting at an origin. So, in these pictures, it's showing like the arm or the leg. Okay, it really can be any point of any specific origin. Okay, so we think about like the chest cavity or the diaphragm. So, whatever we start as an origin. So if we say that the belly button is proximal to the waist versus the reproductive organs would be distal to the waist, right? So we're talking about the farther we get away from the origin, we're calling that distal, okay? And it kind of has, think about the root there. Dis would be like a distance away, okay? Proximal is closer to the origin of a specific area. Okay, does that make sense for everybody there? So proximal is based off of the origin of a specific area that you're referencing to. Okay, so if I'm trying to locate something, you could say, if I'm trying to locate or if I'm trying to describe a specific area of the face, okay? So if I say, hey, is the pain proximal to the nose? Is it more distal from the nose? Okay, so is that pain closer to your nose or more distal from your nose, right? So describing situations and locations, you can use those terms, proximal or distal. All right, so medial and lateral. Medial, if I drew a center line from my belly button, vertical, straight down, straight up. So that center line is basically from my belly button is likely going to go straight through my chest cavity. So medial is here, it's the midline. So if it's going to go straight up, cut my face in half, straight down between my legs here, okay? So that's medial. Okay, so that's like your midline. So think about midline. So if I'm locating something, is it closer to the midline? Is it closer to medial? Or is it lateral? Is it farther away from my midline? Okay, so think about that in medical terms. So if you go to the doctor and they say, is it, you talk about an injury that is medial to your belly button. Okay, so it's closer to midline, or is it lateral? Is it farther away out to your side? Okay, so medial versus lateral. And you'll get some practice. Like I said, we'll play a little game tomorrow that'll let you get some practice. But we will have a quiz coming up this week about these positions. Okay, so make sure you understand this. One part of the quiz could likely be, hey, just you'll get a blank diagram and you'll just label these positions. And then you may get a little interactive quiz where I describe a situation and you tell me the terms, or I act out a situation or point to certain areas and describe something and you tell me the correct term. I'm not trying to make it difficult, but just so you understand it, okay? Everybody good with anatomical positions? Anybody have questions on those or need some clarification on those? Make sure you have it correct on your diagram, okay? All right, we'll get back to a little bit of biology. Okay, we're going to skip these. We already talked about nucleus, different chromosomes. Okay, this isn't necessarily on your doodle notes, just because I wanted to just briefly touch on it, just about the chromosomes more specifically. We have 46 total chromosomes, 23 different pairs. It's made up of our DNA, which it codes for all the processes that the cell does. Okay, so DNA the chromosomes are responsible for the processes of the cell. Okay. All right. So if we get next page, we're talking about DNAs to proteins. Okay, this double helix thing. It's your top left where it says DNA. You got your double helix there. Have you guys remember anything about DNA and this double helix or transcription translation back from biology maybe or chemistry? You may have hit on it. Again, we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. This is hopefully just a little bit of at least maybe you'll think, hey, I kind of remember talking about that back in the day. If you don't, it's not that huge of a deal, but just to give us a little bit of foundation of the cellular level and what's happening inside of our body to make things the way they are. All right, so DNA is shaped here like a double helix. Okay, so in this top box, so it's shaped like a double helix. It looks like a twisted ladder here. We can represent it, if I were to look at this in a microscope at the microscopic level, which we won't do. If I looked at cells and looked at the DNA of it inside of the nucleus, this is what you would it would replicate the most. Okay, and again, let's not spend so much time on some of this stuff. It's more about just refreshing, even just throwing some things out there you may not be familiar with, where it says here, A always bonds with T and C always bonds with G, blah, blah, blah. This is called the principle of base pairing. So inside of the DNA, inside of the nucleus of the cell, there is pairing going on, okay? And these chromosomes, right, these things pair. And if you look over here on this little diagram, it talks about adenine, thymine, xylazine, guanine, phosphate, backbones. Okay, those are very specific parts of DNA. All right, so again, I just want to throw this out there more than anything. I'm not expecting you to understand it and be able to regurgitate this by any means, so don't get caught up in this. I'm just kind of throwing some information out there to you, okay? I don't want to, because this stuff can get really confusing, especially, but this stuff for you guys who are getting into the medical field and want to do medical field stuff, you will have to dig quite a bit deeper, and especially into the college level. Okay, this stuff is approaching college level stuff that I'm not going to go there by any means. Okay, here's what you have to understand: it's used to code for all the proteins required by the body. Okay, so that DNA gives the body the proteins, and it codes it for it, sends it through, the double helix, and ships it out. And again, this is on Classroom for you to reference back to, but I'm telling you, don't get caught up in a lot of this part of stuff. Okay, I'm giving you a little heads up there. We're not going to watch the video. It's not worth the time to get too involved. You guys good with that? It's on there on the slide if you want to watch it on your own time. Okay, so we'll talk about transcription here. It's just the process of converting that DNA into the mRNA message. So it's just sending those signals throughout the body. Converting that DNA into the mRNA. Give me just a second. And again, it's just a code for transferring information. Okay, it's part of the protein synthesis. So synthesizing proteins and sending them out to the body. It's transferring and converting the DNA, the code that the DNA sends it out in this different type of message. Okay, and again, just for your reference, the mRNA is basically just a ribonucleic acid. So a messenger of the M, ribonucleic acid, RNA. Don't get caught up too much in that. Okay, so I'm actually not, you don't have to write any of this stuff. Let's just skip this part because it's not as important to get confused on this. So again, the translation process, you can write this part down. So we're kind of following this process from DNA to the mRNA. All right, so it leaves the cell's nucleus and it heads to the ribosomes where the proteins are made. Okay, so if you're not following this, one thing you need to understand here is that proteins are super, super important, right? So the proteins go throughout our body and give us, it's important for all those tissues, all of our organs, and it's made right there inside of the cellular level. Amino acids here, they link together in a specific chain, which folds into the protein. Okay, so all three of these processes are dealing with proteins to get out to our body. If you get nothing else from those three slides with the double helix DNA, the transcription, the translation, okay, think about creating and linking proteins and sending it out to the body. Okay, that whole process is really breaking it and really dumbing it down, and that's what you need to understand the most. Okay, because that can get really intense, and it's at this point, like I said, it is not super necessary to understand all that just yet. All right, so we're talking about cell division. This stuff, again, hopefully you did talk about. So when a cell grows too large, okay, we start developing proteins, it's growing, it's sending out the waste, but it still continues to build. It is necessary for it to bring in nutrients, remove the wastes, all those things so that it can divide, okay? So that we want cell growth, okay? Our body is made of zillions of cells. Some die, some just grow, right? So we think about, I always visualize the process of muscle growth, right? So a lot of them are dividing and growing and multiplying. Okay, so in order for a muscle to grow and grow bigger, right, more cells have to be present, so they divide and grow from there. All right, so to prevent some of those wastes becoming inefficient, for the cell to become inefficient, it divides, on a regular cycle. It's constantly dividing and growing. Okay, one process here is mitosis, if you remember. Okay, it's the period of division in somatic cells. Anybody know what it means by somatic cell? So somatic cells, it's a big term for just meaning all cells with the exception of sperm cells or egg cells. So anything sexually related. So our body is made of somatic cells. So all cells with the exception of sperm cells or egg cells. Okay, so anything dealing with reproduction, that's not what it's talking about here. Okay, so mitosis deals with the division of chromosomes and the cytoplasm. Okay, a single parent cell will end up making two identical cells. Okay, so one parent cell makes two identical, we'll call them, they hashtag daughter cells, so two cells. One parent cell makes two. Oops. Meiosis, okay, so this is the part of the sex cells. All right, so the period of division of those. Again, it's dividing the chromosomes, the cytoplasm, but the parent cell makes four, okay? So mitosis making two, meiosis making four. Oops. You can see the process dealing with interphase to, creating the daughter cells, and those daughter cells creating more daughter cells for a total, ends up being a total of 4 different cells. A couple more slides, and we've already talked more than I want to, but we're almost done with these, so I'm just going to keep plugging away if you bear with me. So remember, don't freak out with all this stuff. This is just kind of looking back at the foundations. I don't expect you to understand the stuff. The meat and potatoes of this class is going to become the systems, the body systems. Yes, sir?
Can you go back a slide real quick?
One slide?
Yes.
To mitosis? That one? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I can leave it there for a few seconds. You good there, Sonny?
Yes.
Yes? Everybody good there?
Yes, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. All right, so the last piece here is transport, right? Oops. Okay, cells need to move materials in and out, obviously. Okay. And they use specialized, what they call semi-permeable membranes. What does the term semi-permeable? What do you mean? Well, let's break it down into permeable. What's permeable mean? If something's permeable, what does it mean? Yes? Right, it can pass through it, right? So if something is permeable, it can pass through pretty easily. So semi-permeable means that, it can pass through, but with some restrictions. So these membranes are allowing, certain things to pass through. Not everything can pass through easily, but it can pass through. All right, so first method of transport is through diffusion. Okay, diffusion of substances, osmosis are both passive. So they're able to pass through, they're passive transporting. Again, you can, this is some pretty in-depth stuff, so if you just put diffusion is the diffusion of substance, just kind of write the definition there. Biggest thing is understanding like passive transport. Okay, so understanding passive transport, it's just molecules move from high concentration to low concentration. So it doesn't require any kind of energy, right? So they're just passively moving. They're not having to act a whole lot. Okay, so again, you don't have to write that entire thing. If you want to, you can. You need to understand that passive transport is being able to move naturally, which doesn't require any energy. Okay, so it's not exerting any energy to move from one place to another. So this facilitated diffusion. All right, so larger molecules need to be helped. So there is some, there's going to be required some energy here across the membrane by channels of protein, made of protein. So now we're getting a little bit more energy being used to pass through the process, and that's what it's called facilitated. Facilitated just means that there's help. There's energy now being used. And then active. The last one here is active transport. Okay, so they're moving from the lower concentration to higher, okay, which is the opposite. So it does require lots and lots of energy. going back to facilitated, okay, it's requiring some energy, but it's getting the help of other molecules within there. But active means this is using it all, it's exerting all of its energy to go from one concentration to a higher concentration, okay? And then they talk about two different types of active transport. Again, you don't have to memorize these things. You can jot them down if you want for later purposes. But endocytosis means, in means into, and exo is out. So endocytosis transferring in, transporting in, and exocytosis is transporting out. Okay. Now I know going through these different, phases and transports and reviewing the transcription, translation, DNA, all that fun stuff. I flew through it. I mean, those alone, each of those things, transport, mitosis, meiosis, those are entire units. Okay, so if you do those in biology, if you've been anybody taking AP Bio and that kind of stuff, anybody had that? So I'm assuming you probably got pretty in depth with some of that stuff. All right, that's the class to do those things in. We're not going to spend ample time on those kind of things. It was just to kind of just throw it out there. I know it's probably a little bit overwhelming for some, but it's there. And that's the extent of what I wanted to do for it. Okay, so there's a lot of information, but don't get caught up. Don't freak out that you have to memorize that kind of stuff. This is still pretty much review, or not necessarily even review. It could be just an introduction, just a very surface overview of it. Okay? I know it went a little bit longer than I usually like to, but at least we got through it. So tomorrow, like I said, we'll play a game to go kind of refresh and go back to our anatomical position so we understand directional information on the body. All right? That is all I got.